And as much as possible, you should always try to be loving in how you speak to your child. Okay, another aspect of enhancing the attachment involves taking what I call blah moments and turning them into ah moments. So you can think of a blah moment as you're just sitting there eating breakfast or you're sitting on the couch watching a movie and it doesn't feel like anything special in that moment. You're just, with your child. And if you left it at that, later when the other parent says to the child, oh, you don't really have fun with that parent, you don't really feel close and connected, you don't really have much of a relationship, it will be easier for the child to go along with that idea because the memory traces of the time that the child is spending with you are sort of thin. You can think of it like a fragile thread, that can just be easily erased or cut or blown away or evaporated. It's a thin little nothing of a memory trace that can easily be destroyed. But if you elevate the moment into an ah moment, you can think about it like wrapping the thread, strengthening that memory trace. So when the other parent tries to convince the child that the child doesn't really have fun with you and doesn't enjoy your company and doesn't have special moments with you, it's going to be a little harder for that false idea to take hold within the child, because instead of having a thin thread of a memory of the time with you, it's going to feel like a more sturdy memory, a better experience. So there are three ways to wrap the thread, so to speak, to strengthen the experience and hence the memory of that experience. The first is through touch. If you are just hanging out on the couch, make sure to tussle your child's hair, give them a gentle shoulder squeeze, or rub their feet if they like it, or whatever you can do to add that extra layer of warmth and connection with your child. So that is one way to elevate the moment. The second is through eye contact. If you're just sitting there having breakfast with your child, make sure to make eye contact. Don't get buried in your phone or reading your paper. Sure, it's fine to do those things sometimes, but make sure that you're paying attention, that you are, in fact, emotionally available to your child. And you can do that through a loving facial expression matched with eye contact. Eye contact increases the intensity of the moment. It elevates the moment to feel more special. And the third way of wrapping the thread is through verbalizations. You can say to your child, I just love being with you, or I'm so proud of who you are. You're such an awesome kid. Of course, you have to mean it. It has to come from your heart. It can't be empty praise or lavish and extravagant statements like you're the most wonderful person in the whole world, because that's not really going to be believable for the child. So those are three ways to elevate a blah moment into a more meaningful feeling of connection between you and your child. You can touch your child, look at your child with a loving look, and you can make loving verbalizations. And all those things together can help inoculate your child from becoming more alienated, or preventing a mildly alienated child from progressing from mild to moderate to severe alienation. The second strategy that I want to talk about is called don't take the bait. And what I mean is alienated kids often behave in a provocative way. They can be uncooperative, negative, contemptuous, surly, and arrogant. They can really push your buttons. But if you respond with anger or depression, normal human reactions when your child is being turned against you, but if you react that way with your child, you are inadvertently reinforcing the lie. So we don't want the targeted parent to inadvertently reinforce the negative idea. In other words, let's say your child accused you of beating him when he was a baby. And let's say you've never hit your child, not even spanking, you're just totally nonviolent, but your kid is pushing your buttons and in your face with, what you perceive to be really obnoxious and difficult behavior and really unpleasant. And then you react by slapping your kid. Well, now you've made the lie a truth. So let's be clear, targeted parents are held to a very different standard. That is your reality. Targeted parents cannot afford to take the bait. The other parent can engage in some really egregious behavior, but if they're an alienator and the kids are going to prefer that parent and believe whatever that parent says and take that parent's perspective and see the world through that parent's eyes, and no matter what the flaws are of that parent, the children are going to cut that parent slack. That parent can miss special events or be a cheapskate or be dishonest. They can be mean or lazy or whatever. But if they're successfully alienating, then they are succeeding, in getting the kids to minimize or deny that parent's flaws and the kids are going to not pay any attention to that parent's flaws and cut that parent all sorts of slack, but not you. So that is unfair, but that is the reality. You do not have the luxury of taking the bait when your child behaves in a way that you find unpleasant. So I want to teach you a couple of parenting strategies for when your kids are pushing your buttons. So the first suggestion, this is just some basic cognitive behavioral coping concepts to help you not get flooded with negative emotions. All right. When you become emotionally over aroused with sadness or anger or fear, it's hard, if not impossible, to be emotionally available to your child. So there are things that you can do to ensure that you do not react based on negative emotions. First, you can always say to your child, let's deal with this later. For example, if you ask your child to put their cell phone down and your child doesn't do what you ask, there's no rule that dictates that you have to address the situation in that moment. It is really okay to say to your child, well, I'm not happy that you're not putting your phone down. We're going to deal with this later. This is by far a better strategy than letting your emotions get the better of you, and you may make a mistake. If you grab the cell phone out of your child's hands, you might scratch your child, or your child might fall down and bump his head. You could end up with a physical abuse investigation on your hands. So just remember, there's no rule that you have to deal with every parenting situation in the moment. Second, you can even say, let's deal with this later to yourself, and you can schedule a time to process something that's going on so that it doesn't take you out of the moment with your child. Third, remember to engage in encouraging positive self-talk. Try to avoid catastrophizing language like this is the worst thing that ever happened or I can't handle this. Try to remind yourself that you're strong and capable and resourceful, and you can and will deal with whatever comes your way. 4, take some deep breaths, as that can calm the central nervous system down and can help you stay calm and emotionally regulated. And finally, if you feel that a situation is not going well with your child, you can remove yourself from the situation, go to the bathroom, splash some cold water in your face, and give yourself a pep talk. Okay, now I want to offer another suggestion under the category of don't take the bait. And this is for what to do when your child is very upset with you and behaving in a way that's very unpleasant for you. So I have lots of targeted parents tell me, my kid is rude and disrespectful, and I need to do something about that because that's my job as a parent, to give my child feedback when their behavior is wrong or uncivilized. So before I offer this tool, I want to start by giving you a suggestion, which is to avoid all labels. I don't believe it's ever helpful for somebody to refer to somebody else as toxic or abusive or nasty or disrespectful or rude. It's generally demeaning to the child. It's demoralizing to the child. It's humiliating for the child. And it doesn't help foster a feeling of closeness between parent and child. I want to be clear. I'm not saying it's a free-for-all. You're a human being. You have a right to have integrity, to not have somebody treat you in a way that you find very unpleasant. But you can't, in my opinion, start with the negative feedback, such as, how dare you talk to me that way, or go to your room and don't come out until you can be pleasant. None of that, in my opinion, makes sense, because if your child is yelling at you or cursing at you or spitting or doing something else that you find very unpleasant, it's most likely because your child's upset. And therefore, I recommend starting by acknowledging that your child is upset, showing that you care. That's what creates a feeling of connection. And then you can address the unpleasant behavior after that. So here's 3 steps that I think are helpful for when your child is coming at you with a lot of negative energy. So you start by acknowledging that the child is upset. You could say, wow, kiddo, you are really upset. I can tell. And I really want to understand what's going on. Step 2, you explain in a non-pejorative fashion what the child is doing that's uncomfortable or unpleasant for you without any negative labels. So you might say something like, you're talking in a tone of voice that's very distracting for me. Or you could say, your voice is such a high volume, it's hurting my ears. Or you could say, you're cursing at me really doesn't feel good. Or I really don't want to be spit at. You're describing something that's uncomfortable or unpleasant for you, but not in a way that will make the child feel bad. What you want to do is provide neutral feedback, such as I don't want to be cursed at, or I don't want to be yelled at. And then you end this part of the strategy with an invitation to the child to tell you what's going on in a more pleasant way. So now I'm going to demonstrate the whole thing from start to finish. And let's use the example of a child yelling at you. You would say, wow, kiddo, you're really upset and I want to understand what's going on. You're speaking really loudly and the volume is bothering my ears. Can you please say it again in a quieter tone of voice? So this strategy is designed to help the child feel that you care, that you are safe, that you are loving, that you are available. And this is what helps protect the relationship with the child, even when your child is coming at you with a lot of anger and hostility. So let's assume that your child does share a complaint with you and that the complaint is mostly, if not entirely, false. I'm sure many of you can imagine that scenario. The child might say, you stole my college money, or you beat me when I was a baby, or you were mean to, whoever the other parent is. I'm going to teach you what's called the 5 steps. It doesn't matter what the complaint is. If the complaint is untrue, then the targeted parent is likely to respond or want to respond by saying something like, why would you say that? You know that's not true. Why would you believe that? That's ridiculous. Or who told you that? Did your other parent tell you that? And any of those statements are unproductive because they're defensive and unkind. So if you say to a child, how could you believe such a thing? You're basically saying to the child, you're an idiot, you're a fool. If you say to a child, you know that's not true, you're basically calling your child a liar. And so it's highly unlikely to resolve a conflict with a child if a child accuses you of something and you respond with a defensive, that's not true, you know that's not true kind of statement. I've never heard of a situation where a parent responds that way to a child and the child says, gee, thanks for explaining that to me. Now I'm not mad anymore. So now I've taken away from you the one thing you want to do, which is to just, to defend yourself and explain that you're being misunderstood, that bad thing your child thinks you did didn't happen. As a human being, that's what you want to do. If you're accused of something that's untrue, you want to defend yourself. But now I'm going to give you the 5 steps, which is what to do instead. I'm going to name each step, then I'm going to explain it, and then I'm going to demonstrate it. So the first step is called gratitude, and this means telling your child that you're glad that your child is sharing a complaint with you. Now, most people do not actually feel happy when a child complains. No one really thinks, yippee, my child's complaining. That does not really happen. But I want to explain to you why you should not just express gratitude, but actually feel gratitude. I'm going to start with the premise that all children have grievances about their parents. All parents hurt, frustrate, and disappoint their children. And so the question you can ask yourself is, who do I want my child complaining about me to? Do I want my child complaining to the other parent if I've done something, or my child thinks I've done something that hurt or bothered or frustrated him? Or do I want my child to bring the complaint to me? I think most targeted parents understand that it's not really helpful when the child complains about them to the other parent, because the other parent, if they're an alienator, is going to fan the flames of the child's discontent rather than help resolve the conflict and work it through. So if you're a targeted parent and your kid is complaining to you, you should be feeling grateful that at least the child's coming to you with the complaint. Likewise, another alternative that's not so good is your child shutting down. So many targeted parents, especially when the kids are severely alienated, have the experience of the kid basically saying, screw you, I'm not talking to you, and shutting them out, going up to their room for the whole visit, putting on their earbuds, and basically not paying any attention to the parent and not investing any energy in the relationship. Those parents are, desperate to hear from their child. What's on their mind? What is it? What have I done? What are you upset about? So when your child complains to you, even though you don't enjoy it necessarily, you could feel gratitude that at least your child's talking to you and at least your child is bringing the complaint to you. A helpful analogy might be, if you can think back to when your child was young and maybe you took your child to the playground and, he skinned his knee at the playground and he runs up to you to kiss his bloody knee and make it better. Do you really want to kiss a bloody knee? Probably not. It's kind of gross. But you wouldn't want your child bringing his bloody knee to somebody else, right? So a complaint about you from your child is sort of like the bloody knee. The child is bringing something to you that's not particularly pleasant, but it is acknowledging that there's a relationship. And that's a good place to start. Another way to think about this, just to continue with this idea about why you should feel gratitude, is if you've ever been single and you go out on a couple of dates and the person's more into you than you're into them, and you really just don't want to have that next date. And the person's asking you, why? How come? What did I do? Please tell me. I think intuitively you feel like, ugh, I can't be bothered. I don't want to invest any energy into explaining myself to this person. So you don't want to tell them what they did that you didn't like, because you know that by investing energy into this relationship and explaining what's bothering you, you're kind of giving that person hope that if they just fix something that you would want to be with them. But if you're truly done with the relationship, you're done. You don't want to fix anything. You don't want to move forward with that person. You don't want to invest energy and explain what you didn't like. So again, as long as your kids are bringing a complaint to you, they are telling you in so many words that they are not done. They are still willing to invest energy into this relationship. And that's why you should feel gratitude. Okay, now I'm going to explain how to express gratitude. The first thing that I want to say is that when you express gratitude to your child, you have to do so with energy in your voice, because that's part of you investing energy in the relationship. If you talk to your child in a blasé, nonchalant, or casual way, you are conveying, I don't really care. And you definitely don't want to do that. You want to convey to your child that you're investing energy in the relationship because you love your child. The second thing I want to say about step 1 gratitude is that it has to be 5 sentences in length. So it's not, gee, thanks, because that's low key and it's short. So here's how you express gratitude in 5 sentences. Okay, so let's take as an example a child named Chris. And Chris's complaint is, you beat me when I was a baby. But really, it just could be anything. This could work for almost any complaint. It could be, you stole my college money, you never paid attention to me, we were never close, you're a cheapskate, whatever. So you start by saying, Chris, thank you so much for telling me that you think I beat you when you were a baby. So the first sentence of the first step, gratitude, is to say the child's name, to say thank you, and to repeat the child's complaint using the child's words. So if the complaint is, you beat me when I was a baby, you're not going to say, thanks for telling me that ridiculous idea that your other parent brainwashed you into believing. And you're not going to say, thank you for telling me that you think I'm the worst parent in the whole world ever, because that's not what your child is saying. You're going to repeat back the child's complaint using the child's words to show that you are listening. Okay, but that's only one sentence. And remember, step 1, gratitude, is supposed to be 5 sentences. So here's how you can expand it. I cherish our relationship, and I hope that I never hurt or frustrate or disappoint you, but I always want to know if you feel that I have. I'm so grateful that you're telling me and letting me know what's on your mind. And you know what? It's easy to complain about someone behind their back. It takes courage to look me in the eye and tell me what's going on. So I'm really proud of you today because I think you've been really brave. So step 1 is loaded with positive words like pride and cherish and appreciation and courage and bravery. You want your child to walk away from this experience feeling good about himself. And if you have any doubts about this, you can engage in a little thought experiment. Imagine that you have a boss and you say to your boss, hey boss, I'm kind of upset. I feel like you threw me under the bus at the staff meeting today. Now imagine if your boss said to you, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. Now imagine if your boss said, thank you so much for telling me that you think I threw you under the bus at the staff meeting this morning. I value you as an employee so much. I'm so glad you're telling me that I did something, or you think I did something that didn't feel good for you. It's easy to complain about the boss behind my back. You've got guts coming in here and telling me to my face. That's awesome. Imagine how you would feel under those 2 scenarios. I think that you would prefer to be spoken to, and you would feel better about yourself, and you would feel better about your boss if the boss spoke to you with 5 sentences of high intensity gratitude. And that is what you want for your child, to feel good about himself when he's with you. That doesn't mean that you always agree with him or always give him what he wants, but it means that you're always loving and respectful. Not only will he feel good about himself, but he will feel good about you. And that's what you want. My point is that you want to create a positive reinforcement for the child for complaining to you so that your child will do it again the next time he has an issue. If you make the child feel ashamed or ridiculed, or you respond with anger and hostility, the child may not want to bring the next complaint to you. Now we're going to step 2, which is called compassion. This is also 5 sentences of high intensity speech. The purpose of compassion is to show your child that you're paying attention to her emotional state in the moment. So when your child says to you, "You beat me when I was a baby," is your child saying it with anger? "You beat me when I was a baby." Or sadness? "You beat me when I was a baby." Or confusion? "You beat me when I was a baby." So I want you to pay attention to what your child is feeling as she's telling you what is bothering her. And you're going to do that by paying attention to 4 things: the words she's using, her tone of voice, her facial expression, and her body posture. You're going to pay attention to these 4 things, and you're going to take an educated guess as to what your child is feeling. And then you're going to reflect that back to your child with 5 sentences of high energy speech. So that's the paying attention to words, tone of voice, facial expression, and body posture. So I want to warn you that it's very hard to do that. And it's hard because when we are attacked, and if your child is coming at you with a lot of negative emotion, you want to defend yourself. And when we're attacked, we go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. We don't go into compassion mode. I have a theory about this. My belief is that our ancestors back on the African plain, when they were being chased by a lion, they were not thinking, "Oh, poor lion, what's he going to have for dinner tonight?" Those people who felt compassion for the lion while being chased, they were probably distracted. They weren't as focused on escaping the lion. They probably stumbled and got eaten by the lion. They are not our ancestors. We're descended from people who went into fight, flight, or freeze mode, and they saved themselves. They weren't thinking about the lion. They were focused on survival. They went into tunnel vision mode when all of their energy and resources were channeled into survival. There was no room for compassion. So it's in our DNA to feel defensive when we are attacked instead of feeling compassion for the person who's attacking us. Luckily, there's a couple of easy ways to override the shutdown of compassion. The easiest thing is just to take a couple of deep breaths. That calms the central nervous system down and it gets you out of fight, flight, or freeze mode. You can also say to yourself, "My child is not a lion. My child is not going to eat me. This is a suffering child. My child is hurt and upset." And those kinds of thoughts should allow you to pay attention to your child's words, tone of voice, facial expression, and body posture. And you can place your feet firmly on the floor. That grounds yourself literally and can get you out of fight, flight, or freeze mode. All right, now I'm going to demonstrate how to put that into practice with 5 sentences of high octane speech. Let's use the example of a child named Chris who thinks that you beat her when she was a baby and that she's angry, since anger is the go-to emotion for alienated kids. So you would say, "No wonder you're so angry. You think I beat you when you were a baby. And boy, I can see how angry you are feeling right now. I can tell from your tone of voice you're feeling angry. You're speaking loudly and with an angry, stern tone. I see the anger in your face. You have a scowl and a stern look on your face and your jaws clenched. And I can see the anger in your body. You're standing there with your hands on your hips. You look like you're ready to go to battle." So the purpose of this step is to show your child, I'm paying attention to your emotional state. And it is my belief that that is something that every child wants from their parent. All right, step 3 is called empathy. This is also 5 sentences long and is spoken with energy. The purpose of step 3 is to show your child that you're trying to look at the situation from your child's point of view. That doesn't mean that you necessarily agree or disagree. We're going to get to that in a moment. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate empathy. You could say, "Chris, if I were a 17-year-old girl and I thought my mom beat me when I was a baby, I would be steaming mad too. I'm really trying to understand our relationship from your point of view. I'm trying to look at things from your perspective. If I believe what you believe, I would probably be feeling what you're feeling. I get where you're coming from. All right, now we're going to move to step 4. It's called the minor correction. And it's called the minor correction for 2 reasons. The first is that it's minor in terms of energy. Instead of being high energy like the first 3 steps, it's low key, nonchalant, blasé, casual. It's also called the minor correction because it's short. It's 1 sentence. The purpose of this step is for you to tell your truth. Here are some different versions. If the complaint is 100% objectively false, like you stole my college money and the money's still in the bank, you could say, you know, it didn't actually happen. Just like that. So if the accusation is you don't listen to me, you could say, oh, I thought I was listening, because that's your truth. You thought you were listening. If the accusation is you don't love me, you can say, I know in my heart that I love you, because that's your truth. You don't get to say to the child, you know I love you. I don't believe anybody gets to tell anybody else what they know, but you can speak your truth. If the accusation is you yell, you can say, oh, I didn't think I was yelling. If the accusation has anything to do with the other parent, you know, you were a bad husband or wife, or it's your fault the marriage broke up, or you're causing pain to mommy or daddy, or anything at all to do with the other parent, you could say, you know, I see that differently. Or you could say, I have a different perspective on that, or I have a different understanding about that, or I have a different memory, depending on the specifics. All right, now we're going to go to step 5, which is a recap of the first 3 steps. You just roll right from step 4 into step 5. So I'll demonstrate. So let's say it's you stole my college money and the money's still in the bank. You would say, well, that didn't actually happen. So that's step 4. But now we're going into step 5. I understand that you think it's true and that you're very upset and angry about that. And I want you to know I'm so grateful that you're sharing this with me, because now I understand where you're coming from. Now, if the accusation is relevant for the future, like you don't listen to me, so that's something that could happen, you know, ongoing. It's not an argument about something that happened in the past. You could end with an invitation. I invite you to tell me anytime you feel that I'm not listening, and I will stop what I'm doing and focus more on understanding what you're saying. Or if the accusation is you yell, you could say, I invite you to tell me anytime that you feel that my tone of voice is too loud or too intense, and I will speak more quietly. So to recap, the 5 steps are for situations when your child is accusing you of something that is mostly, if not entirely, untrue. Now, let's talk about how to respond if the child's accusation is at least partly true, or maybe mostly true, or maybe even entirely true. If that's the case, you don't want to spend 15 minutes going through the first 3 steps. It's just too long to get to the part where you say, you know, I agree. So what I recommend is a modified 5 steps, where instead of 5 steps of gratitude, 5 steps of compassion, 5 steps of empathy, you just do 1 or 2 sentences each. So let's take an example of the child who says, you slapped me when I was 10. And let's say that happened. You probably don't want to say to the child, you know, why can't you get over it already? Or I already apologized. Why are you making such a big deal about it? Did your other parent encourage you to bring this up? So you don't want to minimize or rationalize your behavior. You don't want to explain, I only did that because you were behaving badly. You don't want to justify, minimize, or anything like that. It doesn't help. So what I want you to do, or what I encourage you to do, is a modified 5 steps. And this is what it would sound like. Chris, thank you so much for telling me that you're upset because you believe that I slapped you when you were 10. I can see how upset it's making you. And you know what? If I were a 15-year-old boy and I was remembering a time when my mom slapped me when I was 10, I might be pretty angry too. So we just rolled right through steps 1, 2, and 3, just into a little brief. I'm hearing you. I see where you're coming from. Okay. And then step 4 wouldn't be a correction. It would be an apology. You could say, you know, I remember it the same way you do, and I'm so sorry. There's no explaining or justifying. The minute you say, I was tired that day, or I was working hard, or anything that explains why you did what you did, it will feel to the child like you are minimizing or making an excuse. The only exception is if the child asks you, why did you do that? And then you can respond, Thank you so much for asking. I would be happy to tell you what was going on for me that day. But otherwise, you keep the focus on the child in the here and now. When you admit and apologize by saying you see it the same way and I'm sorry, then you can add some questions. You can engage in what I call compassionate curiosity. You're asking questions because you care. So you could ask your child, what did that feel like for you at that time? What does it mean to you now, thinking back on that day? Is there anything else that I've done that's upsetting you that you're still holding on to? Remember, you're not asking questions to prove to the child that it wasn't really bad. You're not saying, well, did I leave any marks? Or, nothing to make the child feel defensive. The questions aren't there to make the child see that she's wrong for being upset with you. The questions are there to show that you care, because presumably you do. So many targeted parents feel, why should I probe my child to explore and expand on her complaints about me? Won't that just make things worse? My child's mad enough as it is. Why should I go there? And my answer is that there's a paradox here in that when you go into the pain, you can heal the pain. So I don't know who's familiar with this toy, which I think is called the finger trap. In this toy, you place a finger in either end of the tube, and then you try to get your fingers out. Intuitively, you would pull your fingers out, but when you do, the tube actually tightens and you get stuck. But if you move your fingers towards the inside, then the tube relaxes and you can get out. And I think that's an apt analogy in that if you try to pull away from the center of your child's pain, you get stuck. But if you can move towards it, things open up and relax, and there's a path forward. So you can end this modified 5 steps with a wish, like, I wish I could go back in time and do things differently, or I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I could do things over again, so I would always show you love and respect, even when I'm upset. So there are 4 final points I want to make about the 5 steps and the modified 5 steps. The first is you might realize after the fact that you missed an opportunity. And don't be too hard on yourself. None of this is obvious. None of this is intuitive. Fortunately, you can always go back to a topic and ask for a do-over. You can say to your child, hey, remember last night, last week, last year, 10 minutes ago, when you shared that you were upset about blah, blah, and I responded by getting kind of defensive? That's not how I wanted to respond. What I really wanted to say is thank you. And then you go into the 5 steps. Second, if your child accuses you of sounding different or like a therapist or you got coached, I recommend not getting defensive. There's nothing to be ashamed about. I recommend that you own it as a point of pride. You're darn tootin', I sound different. I'm learning all sorts of new ways to talk to you kids because nothing's more important to me than getting this relationship back on track. Take it as something to be proud of that you're learning new ways. Third, if you're worried that you'll forget the 5 steps, and many people do, you can write them down on a piece of paper and refer to the paper in front of your child. You can say, I made some notes about how I wanted to handle this the next time you raised an issue with me. Again, there's nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to hide. And finally, if you use the 5 steps a bunch of times, it's going to get repetitive and your kids are going to think you're kind of robotic. At that point, you can say, you know the drill. First, I'm going to thank you for sharing and let you know that I always want to know what's on your mind. And then you can express a little gratitude. And then you can say, and now, I'm really going to pay attention to your emotional state. It looks like you're feeling blah, blah. So you can sort of talk about the steps as you're doing them. And that way you're not sort of pretending this is, new. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next protection strategy. And this is how to foster values in your child. And there are 3 values in particular that are relevant for protecting your child from becoming alienated: forgiveness, compassion, and integrity. I'm going to explain each one, why it's relevant specifically for alienation dynamics, and then offer some suggestions about how to foster that value in your child. So the first value is forgiveness. This is particularly relevant for parental alienation situations because, as I've said already, all parents are imperfect. All parents hurt, frustrate, and disappoint their children. And if your child comes to believe through the alienation efforts of the other parent that you've engaged in a behavior that's unforgivable, then your child is well on the road to becoming alienated. So the goal is not for you to be perfect, although of course that would be lovely. It's not really possible. The goal is for you to be the best possible parent you can be And then to have a child who accepts you with your imperfections and is able to forgive you when you do something that hurts, frustrates, or disappoints him. If your child believes that you've engaged in a behavior that's unforgivable, then your child will become alienated. So here are some ways to foster the value of forgiveness in your child. The first is if your child naturally exhibits forgiveness towards somebody else, then you want to highlight it by using the word forgiveness and commending, praising, and appreciating your child for demonstrating that value. For example, let's say you have two kids and one of your children was annoyed or hurt or angry or frustrated with their sibling, and then forgives that sibling and does something nice for that child who earlier had been so annoying. Then you can say to your child, wow, your sister was really bugging you earlier, but it looks like you've forgiven her and now you've decided to share your cupcake with her. I wonder how that feels for you. I know that I'm impressed and proud of you. So instead of saying to your child, oh, you're so nice for sharing your cupcake or good girl, you're being very specific about the value that your child is exhibiting and praising and recognizing your child when your child demonstrates that value spontaneously. Certainly, if your child forgives you for something you've done, you can thank your child and again, note specifically that she's engaging in forgiveness. Let's say you promised to get Chinese food on the way home, but you forgot or were too busy or ran late or whatever, and you show up and you don't have it. Your child wants it, but said something like, that's okay, Mom. I know you'll get it next time. You could say in response, wow, thank you for forgiving me. I really appreciate that. I'm noticing how flexible you're being. I'm so proud of you. So you're using the word forgiveness and thereby helping your child develop an identity as somebody who has forgiveness in her heart. And of course, you can also talk out loud as you demonstrate forgiveness throughout the day. Let's say you're driving in the car with your child and somebody cuts you off and you speak out loud and say, boy, that driver really irked me. You know what? I'm going to forgive him. I'm not going to carry that around because that just makes me feel badly. Or if you're watching a movie or reading a book together with your child and a character struggling with the decision about whether to forgive somebody or not, you can ask your child, what do you think that character should do? What would you do if you were in that situation? If somebody shows forgiveness towards your child, whether it's you or a sibling or a friend, you can say, let's say it's you, you know, I'm upset that you did blah, blah, blah earlier, but I forgive you. I'm going to let that go because we'll both feel better. And then you can ask your child how that feels to be forgiven and to acknowledge that the world is a better place when people forgive each other. The second relevant value is compassion. And again, this is relevant specifically for parental alienation situations because alienation works when the other parent convinces the child, manipulates the child, tricks the child into believing that your feelings don't matter. And when your child believes that your feelings don't matter, that is a situation in which your child is much more likely to be harsh towards you, to be demeaning or contemptuous of you, to not factor in your humanity when interacting with you or making decisions. And you don't want your child to break your heart or treat you as if your feelings don't matter. So you want to foster in your child a belief that compassion is an important value. And you want your child to have an identity as somebody who has compassion and values compassion. And the ways that you can foster compassion in your child are to recognize when your child spontaneously exhibits compassion and praise your child and appreciate your child. You can discuss your own feelings of compassion for your child. If your child looks sad, for example, you can say, I feel compassion for you right now. I'm noticing what you're feeling. I'm wondering how I can help you. If your child has an ethical dilemma about how to respond to a situation, you can ask your child to consider how to resolve it in a way that's compassionate towards both the child and the other person. You can ask your child for compassion by saying, you know, I'm stressed right now. I need a little compassion from you. And certainly if you see characters in books and movies engaging in compassionate behavior or having dilemmas where they don't know whether they will or won't be compassionate, you can discuss that with your child. And the third value that's relevant for parental alienation is integrity. And by that, I mean being true to your values and being true to your truth and what you believe, and not being unduly influenced by somebody else to behave in a way that goes against your values. I think it's probably obvious how this relates to parental alienation. If your child has integrity, it will be harder for the other parent to convince your child that you don't love them when you do, or that you're unsafe when that's not true, or that you're unavailable when that's not the case. You want your child to know who you are based on how you relate to that child, not based on what somebody else is telling your child about who you are. And you want your child to relate to you in a way that's based on the values of forgiveness and compassion. So, integrity is a very important value to instill in your child. And the way that you do that is, again, by acknowledging and recognizing when your child exhibits integrity, meaning is true to himself. For example, resisting peer pressure or studying hard when cheating would be possible, or being kind when it has no obvious reward to the child for doing it, but just because that's what the child believes in. Anytime you see your child demonstrating what you would consider to be integrity, you can acknowledge it in the child. You can say, well, you've exhibited integrity right there. You could have gone a different way. You made a tough choice, but I think you made the right choice for you. What do you think about that choice? All right, moving on. The next protection strategy is how to instill and foster critical thinking skills in your child. So, critical thinking skills is very closely related to the last topic, which is fostering integrity in your child. But critical thinking skills refers to a larger set of behaviors and attitudes and cognitive skills related to trying to figure out what you believe is true, why you believe it's true, what's the evidence that you believe it's true, and what would it mean to you to change your mind. Those are the kinds of questions that somebody with critical thinking skills will ask themselves. If your child has critical thinking skills, she will not be so easily misled to believe that you're unsafe, unloving, and unavailable when that's not true. A child with critical thinking skills will not just believe what they're told, even if it's by a parent, but will have a filter of skepticism such that the child can match a belief or an idea with his or her own knowledge and experiences in order to determine whether an idea is plausible or not. So, some ways to foster critical thinking skills include asking your child when your child makes a declarative statement like Coke is better than Pepsi, or it's a good idea to cram for a test, or who cares about being nice? It's a dog eat dog world, or, any sort of this is a truth kind of statement. Rather than responding with, oh, that's a great idea, or oh, no, that's not true, and putting your 2 cents in, I recommend that you respond by saying, oh, what an interesting idea. How did you come to that? And asking that question in a friendly, open-hearted way. It's not about attacking the child or challenging the child or making the child feel that she has a ridiculous idea or a stupid idea. It's not about what you think of the child's idea at all. It's about you acknowledging that your child has an idea and being interested in how the child came to it. You're asking the child to share, not defend. Another way to instill critical thinking skills in your child is to engage in mutual problem solving. If you and your child don't see eye to eye on something, whether allowance or bedtime, rather than it's my way or the highway approach, or well, it's your life, do whatever you want, you could say, gee, we don't seem to agree about this. You think X is a good idea. I think Y is the way to go. How do you think we can find a solution that we both feel good about? Another way to foster critical thinking skills is to ask your child to consider various options when she shares a problem with you. For example, your child might say, I'm going to fail my math test tomorrow. And instead of just saying, oh, that's not true, or well, you should have studied more, or that's the worst thing ever, we can't have that. Instead of you reacting to the information, you could start by saying to the child, what do you think about that? Do you have an idea of what you want to do? So you're inviting your child to think about choices and options. What are some things you could do since it's 6:00 now and your test is tomorrow? Rather than you telling the child what to do, you're encouraging your child to think up choices for him or herself and consider those choices, which is a critical part of critical thinking skills, not just assuming you have to act a certain way or do the first thing that comes into your head. This is very important for parental alienation. If one parent says to the child, just you call your mother and tell her she's not coming tomorrow, or call your father and tell him not to show up at your soccer game. Much of the time, children feel like they have to do what the parent tells them to do, especially in the heat of the moment. But if you can help your child understand that in most situations there are choices to consider, then you can help the child figure out how to not always give in to that pressure to cut off or demean or whatever to the targeted parent. So take advantage of opportunities to encourage your child to consider options. Rather than you telling a child what to do, ask your child, what are you thinking about doing? What are some approaches you're considering? What are the strengths and weaknesses of that option? So I'm not going to give a lot more attention to critical thinking skills because time is running out and I have so much more content. I will say you can just go online and type in critical thinking skills, and there's lots of fun books and activities to do with kids. Okay. The final protection strategy is to invite criticism of yourself from your child. Rather than waiting for your child to be upset and then hope that your child shares what's on her mind, you can try to identify and diffuse situations and grievances as they arise. So this is about being proactive and inviting your child to share complaints. All right. So you can do this by having a suggestion box in your house, right? And everybody can write suggestions about how things could go better. And others, you could just say to your child, hey, honey, I hope I never hurt, frustrate, or disappoint you. But if I have, I hope you let me know. Anything you want to share? The goal is to create open communication between you and your child and allow you to nip grievances in the bud. All right, I'm going to wrap up this first topic, which is interacting more effectively with the child. And now I'm going to turn to the second major topic, which is how to reach out to an adult alienated child. Okay. So I want you to close your eyes and take a few deep breaths. And I invite you to imagine that you're standing on the side of a riverbank and your child is on the other side. And the river itself represents all of the hurt and anger that lies between you and your adult alienated son or daughter. And if you're like many other targeted parents, the actions that you've taken up until now basically represent you standing on your side of the river, calling out across the river to your adult child. Perhaps you're saying things like, if you knew my side of the story, you wouldn't be so hurt or angry with me. Perhaps you've even said, I'm sorry for everything or anything I've done or that you think I've done that's hurt you. But that hasn't worked. And in keeping with our metaphor of the river, it's like standing on your side of the river, asking your child to come to your side and look at things from your point of view. And that doesn't work. So what I want to describe to you is a method for writing a letter that, in keeping with this metaphor, involves building a bridge, walking across that bridge, and standing next to your adult son or daughter and looking back at the relationship from his or her point of view. Now, many of you, upon hearing what I just said, might be thinking, why should I apologize for something I didn't do? Or you might be thinking, I already tried that and it didn't work. Or you might be thinking, I'm the victim here. Why should I be chasing my child? Why do I have to do all the work? So I'm going to try to answer these questions. First, at no point do I recommend apologizing for something you did not do. I think targeted parents get trapped sometimes in this binary thought process that says you either prove you didn't do something wrong or apologize for something you did not do. But I firmly believe that there's a middle space that involves acknowledging your child's perspective without agreeing or arguing about the facts. And I'll get back to this in a moment. The second concern is that what I'm recommending has already been tried. I already did this. I already wrote a letter and it didn't work. That's possible. I can say from personal experience that many people have told me over the years that they followed the guidelines that I'm suggesting, an earlier version of which is in one of my books. And people tell me they tried it and it didn't work. But then when I ask them to send me the letters they wrote, it's not exactly really what I'm talking about. And that's because it's very hard to do this on your own. You may think you did it. You may think you did what I suggested, but the letter might have drifted in some ways that didn't quite, keep it as pure as it should be. You might have drifted into, blaming, shaming, victimizing, etc. So I've helped many people write letters, even after they've told me they already written one. And the letter that we worked on together was quite different. Sometimes this is something I do in my coaching practice. You can find other people to help you do the letter as well. I'm not saying I'm the only person, but I would say that you might think you've already done it, but maybe you haven't quite. The third concern is that it's unfair for you, the targeted parent, who's already been so maligned and mistreated, to have to do this really hard work of building the bridge. And, to that I say you're absolutely right. It is terribly unfair. And you certainly don't have to do it. But here are some reasons to do it, even though it's unfair. You are the parent, and parents generally have to make the greater effort in the parent-child relationship. You are older and have more life experience. Actually, nope, I'm going to go back if I can. All right, sorry about that. So you're older and you have more life experience, so it's fitting for you to do this work. You're the person who's most in touch with the desire to repair the relationship. Of course, you can keep doing what you're doing, or you could decide to try something new. It's entirely your choice. What I'm going to do tonight is offer you a way to think about doing something new. You get to decide if it makes sense for you. And you may be asking yourself at this point whether it's been successful over the years. Have I actually helped anybody? And I am happy to say that I have, but certainly not everybody. I don't have a magic wand. Boy, do I wish I did. Okay, here's the bunny. So this is a helpful image that I'd like to offer to you. It's the mother bunny in the beloved book, The Runaway Bunny. And in this book, the baby bunny imagines various scenarios of running away. Perhaps he'll join the circus, or he'll become a crocus in a hidden flower garden, or a bird that flies away, or a boat that sails away. And in response, the mother never gets her feelings hurt and she never gets angry. She always responds with a loving message. Like, if you become a bird and fly away for me, I'll become a tree that you come home to. If you become a crocus in a hidden garden, I will become a gardener and I will find you. And I love, in the end of the book, the little bunny just decides that he might as well just stay and be her little bunny. And I love this mother bunny because she never gets offended or insulted by her child's desire for separation and independence. She maintains an unwavering positive image of her role in her child's life, and she's able to respond to his rejection in a loving and connected manner. Now, to be fair, there doesn't seem to be another parent bunny undermining her, so it's easy for her to stay compassionate and connected, but that is what is required of you. And I invite you to channel your inner mother bunny or daddy bunny when thinking about writing the letter. Okay. I'm sorry, I seem to be a little out of sync with my slides here. So I want to be clear that this bridge we're talking about is forged from the love that you have for your child and the belief that your child still loves you, even if your child cannot admit it. You must make this effort with love and compassion, not resentment in your heart. Okay, the bridge is not a demand for or expectation for an apology from the child. It's not a demand that the child sees and knows your side of the story the same way that you do. It's not an expectation that the child will see the favored parent the same way you do. There may never be a fully shared understanding of that relationship between the child and the other parent. It also does not involve groveling and insincere contrition by you for crimes not committed. So I want to return for a moment to this idea of finding a space that neither demands your child see things from your point of view, nor agrees with the child's false narrative. And to make this point, I want to provide you with an example of a true client of mine. She told me that when her son was 7 years old, she asked the father, she asked him if she could move away with him, and according to her, he agreed. So she sold her house and quit her job, and she got a new house and a new job several states away. The day before she was set to move, the father filed an emergency motion preventing her from taking the boy with her. And she lost the temporary hearing, and she decided to move anyway. She didn't want to lose her new house and new job, and she hoped that she would win at the trial. However, she did not win, and she was never the primary caregiver again. According to her, she and her son eventually became alienated from each other. And by the time she came to me, she had reached out to him over the years and written him several letters explaining that it wasn't her fault that she lived so far away. She shared that the father had tricked her into moving away and that she suffered from missing him and so forth. By the time she came to me, she had not been able to establish contact with her son. So I was not surprised, since her efforts at that point had involved explaining to her son that he was wrong or stupid or bad for feeling the way that he did. So I helped her write a letter, and one paragraph of that letter sounded something like this. I imagine that you were hurt and angry that I moved away to whatever the state was. And then she told the story from his point of view. You were just a little boy of 7 years of age. You were used to seeing your mom and dad every week. And then all of a sudden, I was an airplane ride away, and we only saw each other on holidays in the summer. What a big change for such a little boy. So at this point, she is writing about the experience from his point of view. Then she continued in this paragraph by asking questions, not to make him justify his feelings, but to show deep, profound interest in his felt experience. She asked, "What was that like for you? Were there times that you missed me and needed me to be there for you and I wasn't? Did other kids tease you because they lived with their moms and you didn't? Did you feel that if I really loved you, I wouldn't have moved away?" And she ended the paragraph with a wish about something she wished she had done differently. And I don't recall what it was, but it could have been, "I wish I had not moved away." Or perhaps it was, "I wish I had worked harder to understand what it felt like for you when I moved away." In my experience, it is through looking at the child's experience from the child's point of view that helps the child to heal. So to recap, the bridge is a heartfelt effort to see the relationship from the child's point of view. It involves standing on the banks of the other side of the river and looking at the relationship from the child's perspective. And the letter is an important opportunity for the targeted parent to show him or herself to be safe, loving, and available. The letter has many benefits, I believe, including giving you an opportunity to show yourself to be safe, loving, and available, to experientially counter the distorted messages about you. It also provides you with an opportunity to expand your awareness of the relationship from the child's point of view. And this can create a greater capacity in you to respond to your child in a way that will affirm the relationship. And the letter can create a paradigm shift within you that can affect how you think about and feel about your child. So the letter represents an opportunity to induce greater compassion within you for your child's suffering. So what I want to do is go through an example and the elements of the letter. But first, if you were to write a letter, the first thing you would have to do is some homework. And there's 3 things. The first is, I want you to imagine that your child makes a new friend. And after about a month, that friend says, "Hey, let's just pretend it's a dad who's the targeted parent, because in this scenario, it'll be helpful for me. Hey, dude, what's the deal with your dad? How come you don't have a relationship with him? I see you talk to your mom all the time. She's calling and you spent Thanksgiving with her. I never hear you talk about your dad. What's the story?" I think you would agree with me that your adult child would not tell this new friend, "Well, my mother engaged in the 17 primary parental alienation strategies and fostered my unjustified rejection of my father." Right? Don't you wish? But if your child said that, your child probably wouldn't still be alienated from you. Your child would also not say, "I don't know." Your child also would not say, "Well, I'm psychotic and my behavior has no relationship to reality." Your child also would not say, "Well, my father slurps his soup and so I can't have anything to do with him." And your child also would not say, "Well, I'm a sadistic bastard and want to break my father's heart." The reason your child would not say any of those 5 things is because as a human being, most likely your adult child, like all human beings, except maybe sociopaths, need to experience themselves as good and loving people. And good and loving people don't say, "I want to break my father's heart," or "I cut off a parent for no reason." Right? Good and loving people have rational reasons for why they do things. So what your child would share with your adult child, to be clear, with this new friend is some list of grievances that are plausible reasons why an adult child would cut off a relationship with the parent. And why your adult child has a list of grievances is because you are an imperfect parent. You have, in addition to whatever the lies are that your kid believes about you, you have actually hurt, frustrated, and disappointed your child, especially if you've been provoked as a targeted parent. So, to be clear, without alienation, most likely your child would forgive you for whatever your imperfections are. But if it is alienation and the other parent is sort of whispering in the child's ears that your flaws are unforgivable and worthy of being cut off, your child has grievances about you. And so your first piece of homework, your first foray over the bridge to your child's side of the river, is to imagine what your child would say to somebody else are the causes of the cutoff. So part of this is not just coming up with a list, it's the perspective taking. So what I generally advise people to do is to take out a piece of paper and write on the top, and again, I'm going to use the example of the rejected dad, I don't talk to my father because he ... And then you make a list as if you were the kid. He is a jerk. He didn't pay for my college money. He favored my sister over me. He broke up the marriage. He did this. He did that. There might be a little truth, no truth, some truth. It doesn't matter. You're just going to make a list of what your adult child would say to a new friend about why there's a breach in the relationship. You're not writing the letter. You are just making a list. The next piece of homework is a thought exercise. You don't have to write anything down. You have to think about something fun you did with your now adult child when your now adult child was an actual child during his or her childhood, an activity that was fun, positive, light, enjoyable, and that activity literally has a positive smell attached to the activity. So it could be you bake chocolate chip cookies with your child at least, a dozen times over the course of their childhood. Baking chocolate chip cookies is a fun thing to do, and there's a nice smell. It could be having a campfire. That's a fun thing to do. It has a good smell. It could be giving the puppy a bubble bath. That could be a fun thing to do, and that could have a positive smell. So it's literally a positive smell. You don't have to write anything down. You would just have that ready when you're going to do the letter. And then the final piece of homework is to find a photograph of when your child was 5 years old, looking happy, not a picture with you. The point isn't to prove to your child, see, look at how much you liked me. Just a great picture of your child. I do warn people doing the homework can be kind of sad. You're thinking about your child's grievances. You're thinking about positive memories. You're looking at photographs. So don't do the homework, unless you're prepared to, feel something. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you if you don't have a big emotion, but you might. Okay, so here are the components of the letter, and then I'm going to walk through with an example. First, there's a loving greeting. Then there's going to be a paragraph where you acknowledge there's distance in the relationship. Then you're going to express a wish for a better relationship. Then there's some kind of hopeful statement about the possibility of reparation and a vision for the future. Then you explain that there's an intention to see things from the child's point of view. Then there's the 3 paragraphs that I call wonder paragraphs because you're wondering or imagining what's on the child's mind. There's an invitation. You're going to share the sense memory. You're going to talk about the photograph, and then you're going to have a loving ending. So here's an example. So you do want to start with a warm opening, not like Chris : right, where it looks like a business letter. It should be my darling daughter, my dearest son, my honey bunny. If there's some sort of precious nickname that wouldn't be embarrassing or intrusive for your child. You want to come up with a very warm opening. In the first paragraph, the intention is to acknowledge that there's distance in the relationship. So you could say something like this. I've been thinking a lot lately about the distance in our relationship. I know it's been a long time since we've been close. And then you're going to tell a story about the day you held the child in your arms for the first time. You're not going to tell a story where you're the hero. You're not going to tell a story that's weird, like I put you to my breast, and that might be kind of icky for the kid. It's just what it felt like in your heart to hold your child for the first time. So I just sort of made up something. When I held you in my arms for the first time and saw your little button nose and bright blue eyes, filled with curiosity, and your darling sprouts of hair, I was filled with awe and love for you. I imagined a lifetime of love and closeness when I held you. Never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined then that we would end up where we are today, with so much hurt and pain between us. So in this first paragraph, you hopefully are conveying to your child, I'm speaking truth here. I know things are not going well, and my heart is filled with love for you. In the second paragraph, you're going to express a wish to have a better relationship. So you could say, you are my precious child. I want nothing more than to have a better relationship with you. And then here you can express a vision for what you want the relationship to be. A relationship filled with love and laughter and a sense of safety and happiness and belonging. I have a vision of our relationship as one filled with love and laughter and sharing, in which you feel and know that I'm there for you in the ways in which you need and deserve me to be. All right. And when I work on letters with people, some of this I sort of give them and some I elicit or have them sort of pull from themselves, because the more specific and you it is, the more your child will recognize it as a letter that comes from your heart. The third paragraph is a vision of reparation. So you could say, one thing I know and believe with all my heart is that sometimes parents and their adult children have conflict and distance, and usually they can find a way to work things out that feels right for everyone. Notice I'm not using the phrase parental alienation. That phrase has an agenda, and you don't want your child thinking that you have an agenda to prove that the other parent manipulated your child to reject you. And then you tell a story of two people, ideally that the kid knows, but certainly two people you know who had a falling out and worked things out. But you have to tell it at a pretty high level, not a granular level. So wouldn't say, you might not know this, but Uncle Joe and Grandpa really got mad at each other when Grandpa changed his will. And then finally Uncle Joe came around. So there's no good guy or bad guy in the story, and it's not about the details. So it's sort of a general, you may not know this, but Uncle Joe and Grandpa didn't talk to each other for quite a while after a falling out they had. And eventually they decided to patch things up, and they're both so glad that they did. So there's no hero, villain, victim in the story that you're telling. It's just your life experience that you're expressing, that you believe that people can work things out. Okay, in this paragraph, the goal is to show your child that you're interested in his point of view. So you would say something like, I've been thinking a lot about our relationship from your point of view. I'm trying to understand what our relationship has felt like for you, what needs of yours were not met, what feelings got hurt, what aspects of your personhood you felt were unseen by me. I want to understand what this has been like so that I can try to make up to you for the ways in which I've hurt you. So that this is our sort of transition paragraph, because now we're going into the three wonder paragraphs. This is really the hardest part of the letter. This is the part that I don't know if people can really do on their own. But when I'm working on the letter with somebody, it's at this point that I ask them to read me their list from the first piece of homework. So you would consult your list of the things that you think your child would say. And usually there's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things on the list. And we'll sort of see if there's categories, ways of combining the child's grievances to identify a couple of, ideally 3 of the most pressing, compelling complaints that the child has. So here's an example. I think that I don't even remember if this is from the mom or dad's point of view. I think it'll be clear after I read it. I've been wondering if you're still upset about my being the one to end the marriage. You were just a little child, just 6 years old when this happened. It must have been so confusing for you to go from living with mommy and daddy together in one home to going back and forth between two homes and having mommy and daddy not get along so well. What was that like for you that to know that I was the parent who chose to end the marriage? Did you feel that if I cared more about you, I would have made a different choice? Were there times when you felt particularly mad at me for making this decision? Were there times when the divorce was particularly hard for you? If I could do things differently, I would try harder to understand what it felt like for you when the family changed, and I would work harder to make sure that you felt loved and safe, even though the family was going through such a big change. So you can see we start the paragraph with stating the problem, then talking about it from the kid's point of view, then asking questions, and then ending with a wish. Here's another one. I've also been thinking about your being upset with me because you believe that I stole your college money. This is something that you've shared with me many times over the years. I want you to know that I appreciate your letting me know what was bothering you, and I always want to be available to hear your concerns with me. What was it like for you to think that I took your money? Did you believe that I demanded to take that money away from you in order to hurt you or spite you? That must have been very confusing to you to think that I would want to take something away from you. I hurt for you knowing that you thought that your mommy would do that to you. I wish I had done a better job explaining how the finances were divided after the marriage ended, so that you could feel in your heart the truth that I love you and never want to deprive you of what is rightly yours. So there's the naming the issue, talking about it from the child's point of view, asking some profound questions, and then ending with a wish. And then here's another example. I'm also aware that you're upset with me because I did not agree to buy a horse for you with, and then it's whoever the other parent was. That was such a painful time for you when you thought that Billy would be your horse, a dream come true. And then I had to be the one to tell you that it was not going to happen. That must have been a crushing blow for you to have something almost happen and then have it snatched away. I imagine that you thought about Billy for a long time afterwards and felt upset with me for a long time. I wonder what you thought about my decision. Did it seem cruel to you? Did it seem to you that I was trying to hurt you and that I was selfish for not agreeing to buy a horse? I wish that I had had the money to buy Billy for you, or that I'd been comfortable agreeing to buy a horse with your other parent. I wish that I'd been able to convey to you that my decision was not made lightly or out of any ill will for you or your father or mother, whoever the parent was. Okay. So those are 3 examples of how you take an issue, you unpack it, and you sit with the child's pain, asking questions to show how much you care about the child's experience. I often find this to be very moving to write these paragraphs with clients, and I think that you as a parent will find it a very moving experience to craft these paragraphs if you do it on your own. The next paragraph is an invitation. So you would say, again, I'm using the name Chris. Chris, my sweet child, my love, you are my precious child, and my heart is filled with love for you. I hope that you can see from this letter that I'm trying to see our relationship from your perspective. I would love to hear your thoughts about what I wrote about and any other concerns about our relationship that are on your mind. You could respond in writing, on the phone, in person. We could get together and chat or meet with a therapist of your choosing if you want. Anything that works for you will be fine with me. So you're basically just opening yourself up here. You're inviting your child to respond, and you're showing yourself to be eager and flexible. Okay, now we're going to get to the second part of the homework, which was the sensory memory, where you had to think of something fun you did that has a good smell attached. So here's an example. The other day, I went to the riverbanks by Valley Park and walked around. It looked and felt as magical as ever. I took many deep breaths of that special combination of earth and water and trees and fresh air that you love so much. So there are the sensory details. I have so many wonderful memories of taking walks with you there. In the spring, you were so excited to see the water rushing by so clean and clear. Do you remember climbing onto that big rock and just sitting there listening to and smelling the waterfall? Those were such lovely times with you. Every time I experience that aroma of clean, fresh air and water, I think of you and your joyful love of nature. So, the point of this paragraph is to tell a story anchored in a specific memory, and the elements that are essential are the olfactory sensory details. So if you were writing about cooking, you would talk about, oh, when the cinnamon and the house was filled with the smells of cinnamon and nutmeg when we made our, gingerbread cookies. You have to throw in the specific olfactory details. And then it has to be something positive about the child. Okay, here's the paragraph about the picture. You would say, I'm enclosing one of my favorite photos of you. You were just about, again, 5 or 6 years old. And then you tell like a little story about the picture. Your first baby teeth just came out. You were so adorable. There you are snuggling with Fluffy, your first pet bunny. You were so careful and loving when you held Fluffy, so aware of how she was feeling, so concerned about keeping her warm and safe. Animals always brought out your best true self, as I can see when I look at this picture of you overflowing with love and joy. So the first part of the paragraph is you're telling the story of the day that the picture was taken, and it has to be a positive story. Let's say it's, the first day of kindergarten. You would say, you couldn't wait to go to school and be a big school kid. You got up extra early that morning and put on your backpack, and you were so ready. You loved to wear your little school outfit. You walked up the steps of school that first day. You just couldn't wait to jump in. So the point is, whatever the picture is, you have to be able to tell a positive story, something about your child's character. You're showing in this paragraph that you really know your kid. And then you end this paragraph with this very specific sentence. I have a copy of this picture taped to my fridge, and every time I go into my kitchen, I see your beautiful face and smile. You have to say that exactly. Don't say, I have a copy of this picture, on my nightstand. It has to be refrigerator. What you're doing is you're creating like a symbolic connection, so that when your child goes into her kitchen, she'll think of you going into your kitchen thinking of her. All right. Then you want to end the letter. You want to say, Chris, I hope that you can see from this letter that I want nothing more than to repair our relationship and find a way forward so that you can have the mother, father, whoever it is that's writing the letter, relationship that you so richly deserve. My door is open, my arms are open, and my heart is open. It doesn't have to be exactly these words. It's important that it's your words, but you have to find some way to express your deepest, most profound desire to repair the relationship. Okay, then if you're not going to work on the letter with me, have someone read the letter. You need to make sure that there's no resentment and anger or self-pity leaking out. It is hard to contain those emotions. You need to make sure that it's authentic. You cannot send the letter if you don't believe it. The worst thing would be you send this letter and the kid says, oh, paragraph 3 was, the best paragraph. Now I know that we agree about, whatever. And you're thinking, oh, I don't agree with that. So you have to make sure that you agree. Can you live with what you said? Can you own it? And does it miss anything? You can't leave out a big issue. When you're making that list and then you're picking 3 things to include in your letter, at the end of the day, you can't omit something that is such a big issue for your kid, because then you look sort of like you're not really paying attention. So it's reinforcing, that you're unavailable emotionally. Okay. So the ideal time to send the letter is when your child is not living with the favored parent. So for those of you who have a kid who, let's say it's August and your kid's still living at home, but September they're going off to college, wait a month. Wait till your kid's in college. If they're living with the favored parent, but they're going to move out soon for some other reason, wait, because you don't want your kid reading the letter with the favored parent, like standing over their shoulder, mocking it, where the child would see the letter through that parent's eyes. So again, if the child's about to head off to college, wait till they're there. If you know if they're living together in the same home, but you know there's a time of day when your child is most likely not going to be in the same vicinity as the favored parent, then send the email then. You need to manage your expectations. I believe that an angry response is a good response. I'm not saying it feels good if you get a response back. You wrote a crappy letter, you suck, that's not going to feel good because you're hoping for a good response. But an angry response is showing an investment in the relationship. No response is obviously the hardest because you don't know if your kid even got it. So an angry response is good because the child is showing that he cares enough to even bother telling you that your letter was no good. Obviously, a good response is a good response. And then no response, that's the hardest. Be prepared. Sometimes people resend the letter in a month. Hey, I'm not sure you got this. And then maybe, something good comes of it. If you get an angry response, a lot of people sort of freeze. Again, they go into fight, flight, or freeze mode, and they don't know what to do. And what I suggest is right away, you send a thank you back. Hey, thank you so much for reading my letter and responding. You've given me a lot to think about. I'm going to, reflect on what you've shared, and I'll get back to you later. So you're not just leaving your kid, hanging. They are sort of in the dance with you. They are communicating with you. You don't want to just leave them with nothing. So if you get an angry response, right away, thank them and then reflect. And again, if you're getting coaching from me, you would talk to me about their response. If it's somebody else, you would let them know. But don't just leave your kid hanging, and don't despair. An angry response, I'm going to just say it again, is not the worst thing. Okay. And as I mentioned before, there may be a delayed effect. The letter may pave the way in some unseen way for some future reparation. So I can tell you, I have never heard of a situation where the letter made things worse. And so at minimum, it may not make a difference, but I believe that it can. Okay, so what's next? And actually, I want to just go back for a moment. When you send the letter, I'm in favor of people emailing it. I don't think that's wrong to email this. And if you do email it, put in the subject header, I'm thinking about our relationship from your point of view, ... That's an invitation. The 3 dots are like, and read more to find out. And I think that could engage a kid like, oh yeah, mom thinks she knows what I'm thinking. Let me see. And that's what you want. You want them to open the email and read it. If you do send the letter as a hard letter, in the snail mail, you can actually write that phrase on the back of the envelope. And if you don't hear back, you should continue cycling through your various types of emails, or text messages, assuming you have a way to communicate, what I call the Happy Tuesday text, just, hey, happy Tuesday. I hope you have a great day. You could send a text, indicting the child. I love you. I want to make things right between us. If you want to try to sort of poke the bear, you could say, you must be hurt and angry with me. Maybe that would get your child attention and responding. You can have general invitations, want to get together sometime to talk or just hang out. And you can have specific invitations, want to catch the new blah, blah movie this weekend, or I'm swinging by Starbucks now. Can I pick you up something? You just want to, every day or every other day, whatever your emailing or texting routine is, you want to just cycle through these. Okay. And sorry, my slides are a little weird there. Okay. So if you get a positive response, you could consider inviting your adult child to participate in restoring family connections. And this is an in-office program. It's not an intensive 4-day program. You're not going to get your adult child court ordered to that, because the courts don't order, 18-year-olds and above to do things with their parents. It's a in-the-office program led by a licensed clinician. The goal is to help targeted parents and their adult alienated children repair their relationship. But it's voluntary. You can't, it wouldn't make sense to invite somebody who's you haven't talked to in a year, and the last thing was, go away, drop dead. First, you have to do the letter to get your kid from 0 to 1. And then if there's a positive response from the letter, then you invite them to do restoring family connections. There's 13 activities. Generally, it could be, one activity a week for 13 weeks, but it's not like it has to be that way. The purpose of each activity is to repair the relationship, strengthen the bond. It's not about parsing the past or arguing over who did what. There's no forced apologizing and groveling. It's very positive, future oriented. So there's an activity where you talk about milestones that you've missed in each other's lives, so that there's no awkwardness. Like, can I ask about the prom that I wasn't invited to? So you just you deal with it. There's an activity called Uh-oh, where you each try to learn from the other one. How are you triggering each other? Are there certain words or phrases or ideas that you're saying that upset each other? You develop a vision of your relationship. What do you want it to be? And there's more information about that. There's a link from my main website, which is amyjlbaker.com. And then you can learn more about restoring family connections. I don't run the program. I just created it. You'd have to find a therapist who's licensed to do it. And again, your child has to want to do it. Okay, I'm going to end with gratitude. I have gratitude for ICENAF for providing me with this platform. I have gratitude for everybody. I know that there's clients and colleagues and people that I know listening to this call. I hope everybody, whether I know you or not, got something out of it. And I'm going to turn it back over to Cindy or Gina for some closing words.
So I would like to take this moment to, with gratitude, thank Dr. Amy Baker for taking the time. This is 2 times within the last 2 months that she's made the time for ICENAF in presentations that we've had. And we were only so grateful for all of your work. I think everybody was able to get a really good insight into that we have a lot more power than we think we do, just in modifying our approach and what we're doing and how we're interfacing with them and how we communicate. And I want to also thank you for the amazing outline that you gave us for the letter. I myself am going to take on the outline and once again reach out to my children. And as I was listening to Amy, or Dr. Baker, I realized that perhaps some of the parents here who aren't able to do coaching with Dr. Baker, if you are interested in working together in a round table, we could all together maybe put a few round tables together and brainstorm together and help each other and read to each other and so forth. So if you're interested in doing something like that, reach out to me via email. However, I do encourage that the finest person to do it is Dr. Baker. She's the creator of it, and she could give you the absolute best coaching. But if you don't have those resources and you want to just get started and get in a community that will support you, we'll be happy to offer that for you as well. But Dr. Baker, I can't say enough. Thank you so much. And I want to say that we see multiple reunifications occurring in our community all the time. And I know it's with your work and from many of the other professionals. But you've been one of the leading forces out there for us. And I want to thank you for the work you continue to do. When I was involved in alienation, my case started back in 2002. There were no books on parenting. There was nobody telling me how to reach out to my children. There was nobody telling me how to parent. And you have since taken that on and you continue to do the work. And now we have new work for adult children, for the therapists to interface with them as well. So with that, I really sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you. Want to invite all the parents to take on your empowerment. Take this information and move out into your world and start using it, utilizing it, reaching out to your children. The holidays are before us. Great time to think about, is there some possibility for you to be reaching out to your children during this time? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gina. Thank you, Dr. Baker, once again, and we look forward to inviting you back. You're always invited back. You have carte blanche with iSnaff. So with that, I'm going to have Gina do our close, and I hope to see everybody at our meetings in October. So Gina, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you very much, Dr. Baker. I really appreciated that. It was so insightful. So Cindy has asked me to do a closing affirmation, and so I will do that today. I came up with 2 ideas, so as you go through your day and sort of absorb what Dr. Baker has said over the next couple of days, weeks, or even months, I say, look at this and think to yourself, today I look for and appreciate the good. And something wonderful is always on the verge of happening, which goes back to what Cindy said. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So always consider that you're never as helpless as what you think. And Dr. Baker gave us some wonderful tools and ways to look at things. And I'm extremely grateful myself personally.